When you live in a society that tends to value productivity over almost every other human need, it can be so easy to fall into the trap of thinking that the product of your book is much, much more important than the process. But unfortunately, when you're trying to write an authentic, genuine story of your life, leaning into some of these productivity hacks that we have learned from living in this very productivity-focused society can actually be the thing that holds back your writing, not only in quality, but also in quantity. And that's why today I want to talk about why productivity might actually be the thing that is killing your memoir. Stay tuned. You've been writing your memoir, maybe even for years. You know your material, you know what it means. What's missing isn't the story, it's the structure. And that's why we started the Memoir Method Book Club. Every single month, Emily Thrash, a professional writer and editor, teaches you how to read like a writer by breaking down a published memoir and showing you what it's doing under the surface. Your first session is free. Head over to pageandpodium.com/book club to sign up. So today's conversation is, in my opinion, long overdue. We have all been living in this world of what Jameson calls late capitalism, in which we are all being pushed to produce. And what I want to talk about today is the reason that is actually quite harmful when you're thinking about writing a very personal book, like a memoir. And what I want to talk about today is I want to get a little bit philosophical. When we think about the idea of productivity, we often think about it kind of in a vacuum. But of course, nothing is in a vacuum in this society that we live in. And that's why today what I want to do is put productivity in conversation with creativity. And then I want to give you some tips for how you can align yourself with a creative version of yourself over the productive version of yourself. And again, why doing that is actually going to get you such better results, not only in the quality of your writing, but also in your ability to move forward, catch that momentum, and really get onto the chapter train, as I know you want to be. So, as I said, we're going to get a little bit philosophical here. And I want to really start by talking through how I'm thinking of these concepts of productivity and creativity. Because I do find that even though, as we'll talk about, they are so directly oppositional, we have often found ways to work around some of the more challenging pieces of that opposition to convince ourselves that they're not actually in opposition. So let's get into it. First of all, let's talk about what we mean by productivity. Now, I'm coming from a very classical Marxist viewpoint. Now, let me give a caveat really quick before y'all hop down to the comments. I am in no way arguing that we should be implementing the Marxist economic system in any kind of a literal sense. Instead, what I want to think about is the way that some of Marx's ideas about the structures of capitalism, the economic structure that we all live in, how some of those ideas can actually be very, very useful for thinking about our behavior and the effects of our behavior on things that we want. So not necessarily our career ambitions, although maybe, not necessarily the things we do for other people, although maybe. What I want to talk about is what productivity means when we bring it into our own psyche. And what I'm talking about is that thing that I bet you felt when you're just trying to enjoy, say, a lazy Saturday, a lazy evening, a lazy Sunday morning, and there's this pull on you that you should be productive, that you should do something, that you should get up off the couch and be productive. And the thing that I want to say is that this is something that is very, very clear in Marx's philosophy. So Marxist philosophy is quite complicated, but the piece that I want to focus here on is the idea of being alienated from the systems of labor. Now, let's kind of talk about what we mean here. And I warned you, we're getting a little bit heady, but I'm going to get through this pretty quick so we can get to the practical piece. When we think about how Marx is talking about alienation, the thing he's describing is sort of the Industrial Revolution. Now, if we think about the Industrial Revolution as this kind of onset of a lot of machinery, a lot of factories, and most importantly, this division of labor where an assembly line system means that we all do our one job over and over and over, the exact same way every time. Now, I think you can kind of see where I'm going here, because what happens in Marx's philosophy is that as he's kind of thinking through, what does that mean? What does that mean to essentially be, as a human being, a cog in a machine of a factory? What he argues is that because we are doing the same thing over and over and over, we really lose any sense of investment. And what he's doing is he's contrasting this with the pre-industrial version of labor. And this makes total sense when we're thinking about writing, because what Marx is talking about is factory work versus craftspersonship. So what Marx says is that when you are a craft person, when you are engaged in a craft, or an art, we could say, you are shaping that product with your hands. You have all kinds of opportunities to express yourself, to explore, to learn, to try a new thing. On the other hand, when you are on a factory floor, you are very much just doing what you are told. Now, of course, these are extremes. There is certainly a possibility that craft people are also just trying to get stuff done as fast as they can. And certainly there are roles in factories that have much more kind of creative input. But the point that we're making here is that Marx says, as we moved from this craft culture into a more industrial culture, one of the side effects of that was that people really lost a connection to the work they were doing. This is all Marx means by alienation, by the way. And the reason I think that's important is that as we are working on things that are creative, things that are important to us, things that we really don't mean to just get done as fast as we can, no matter how they come out, when we're working on those kinds of things, it's very, very easy to get bogged down in this kind of factory industrial culture that, frankly, all of us are living in. And when we kind of lose sight of that, we also lose sight of our creativity. So, all right, let's shift gears. Let's talk about creativity for a moment. Now, when I talk about creativity, I am talking about creativity at the kind of rawest, simplest, most instinctual version of creativity. And what I mean by that is that when we are born, when we are children, our instinct is to create things, and we're not creating things to sell them, right? We're not creating things just to the point that we can hand them off to someone else to finish. We're creating things because it's our lifeblood. We're creating things because creating is how we figure out who we are. We're creating things because it just feels good. It's really fun. And I was thinking about this the other day as I was playing with a friend of mine's daughter. Now, she is just the sweetest 9-year-old and a girl after my own heart. She loves to do a craft. So I was watching her for a little bit while her dad was busy. And one of the things that we were going to do is just kind of go through my craft closet and just pull stuff out and kind of play with it. First of all, let me tell you, it was so fun. But as we were doing that, we were kind of talking about the different crafts that we like to do. And I'm an avid knitter. I often knit things and give them away because I do not need any more sweaters, if we're being honest. And she really likes to make bracelets. And in fact, she had made me a bracelet. I'd made her a bracelet in the past. She makes bracelets for all her friends. And as we were kind of chatting, I was really thinking about what that means, because certainly we can go to the store and we can buy something for someone and we can gift it to them. And that might be really, really meaningful, actually. But also, when we think about getting a handmade gift, something that someone really put themselves into, what a powerful, powerful gift to get, right? That means that someone cared about you enough that they put their heart into something and then gave it to you for free. Now, the reason I want to bring that up is not that the dollar amount matters when we're talking about gifts, but rather because we have this tendency to keep flopping over to this productivity side, right? We keep wanting to go toward the value being dependent on the marketplace. And one thing that I wanted to bring up, because I think this is so similar to writing books, is that very, very often I find that authors, especially memoir authors, will get sucked between these two poles so easily. On one hand, they are creating just the way that little girl was. They are creating for the sake of pouring themselves into something and for the sake of giving that away, of giving that bit of love and care to someone that you really value, that you really care about. And that's a really different way of thinking about value, isn't it? So what I wanted to think about today is when we're thinking about this productivity versus creativity, when we think of creativity the way that we all did when we are kids, it becomes so much clearer why that creativity is so soul nurturing. Because unlike standing on a factory floor and doing the same thing over and over and over again, when we craft, when we create bracelets, when we knit things, when we write, we're taking this piece of ourselves, and yes, we are giving a piece of ourselves to someone else, but we're also giving to ourselves. When we give ourselves that space to play and think and love and care for others, that is one of the things that really makes us human. Unlike productivity, which is something that really wants us to be a little bit more machine-like. So, all right, we've kind of got our definitions here. We've got this idea of productivity, and I'm thinking here again of productivity in the kind of Marxist sense, where we're not necessarily saying you shouldn't be making progress on something, but rather in this view of productivity, the only thing that matters is the product. The process that we use does not matter. Any kind of growth that we may or may not get from the process does not matter. Fun, enjoyment, love, care, none of that stuff matters as much as the product. On the other side, we have creativity, which is just the opposite. When we think about a creative pursuit, the thing that we're thinking of is not the product, it's actually the process. When we engage in something with our full heart, our full creativity, we are very, very often tapping into something that is so much richer and deeper, and something that helps us grow, as well as the people that we are making that thing for. And yes, that includes books, and every single person in your audience will feel the care from your book when we approach it from a place of creativity versus productivity. Now, I wanted to give you a pretty extreme example because I wanted to basically put my money where my mouth is. I know it's so easy to say like, oh yes, of course you want us to enjoy all of it, but I want to get the book done though. I totally get that. And that's why I really want to break this down and again, give a pretty extreme example. Now, a few years ago, before Page and Podium was even called Page and Podium, I was freelancing. I had kind of a small outfit that I had put together. But really my dream was of this company, of what Page and Podium is now. I wanted to start this memoir publishing company that would serve women, that would serve people whose stories deserved to be out there, but who might not be getting the same type of attention in the market as some of the people who we more traditionally hold up as authors and leaders. So I really wanted this to be a space that was kind of a creative collective, not only where we were publishing books, but where we were bringing women, marginalized folks into this world where we could really nurture that creativity. We could really bring people into this world of care and love and encouragement and support and make book writing be about much, much, much more than the product. That's where my heart was. Where my mind was in total burnout. I had spent several years before that getting out of the academy. I was working on founding this company or what would become this company. But at the same time, all of those years as an academic, as a professional researcher, had really made it so that I was seeing most all of my writing, at least the writing I was doing for myself as part of the academy, as something that I had to knock out. So this is a time in my life when I was very, very butt-in-seat oriented. So I would set often 4-hour writing blocks and I would sit there, even if nothing was coming out, even if the entire time all I was doing was stewing and shaming myself for not getting as much done as I wanted to get done. Every piece of my writing was about punishing myself. It was never about finding joy or creativity or love or care. It was about punishing myself for not getting things done as quickly as I thought they should. And I think that will probably make sense if you've been following this podcast for long, because it is my total mission to make sure that other people don't fall into that trap. It can be so harmful. And one of the things that was going on at this time is we had just finished the draft for the summer of 2020, George Floyd and the Resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement. I wrote that with Dr. Andre E. Johnson. But I had another book contract that was waiting. I had put a proposal together. In fact, I had queried. I had gotten a contract extended. We had signed the contract. I was good to go with the press. And in fact, I was so excited to work with this press. I love the editor. I still do, actually. And I was really, really looking forward to this book as well. The idea, I still think, is great. But what I found was I had dug myself so deep into this hole of productivity that I had not only lost the joy of that project, I had not only lost kind of the excitement of like, oh, what a cool idea for a book. I had lost the ability to turn on my creativity. I had lost it. All I could do when I sat down was just hammer the keys like a robot. And the real turning point came when I realized that that's what was happening. Now, again, I warned you, this is an extreme case. You could very well be in this position of punishing and shaming yourself and not have it be so extreme as mine was. And it is still toxic. So the turning point came for me when I decided that that was unsustainable and that I had to stand up for what I wanted in my life, that it could not be about, well, I owe this to my editor and I have this deadline and I have to get it out. The press is expecting it. The turning point came when I said, but what do I want to do? You know what? The answer was not that book. So this was a hard thing to do because, as you no doubt know, getting a book contract is not an easy thing. It's not a fast thing. And I had actually written a pretty substantial part of this book at that point, but I just couldn't do it. I knew that the right thing would be to cancel that book contract. Now, I don't want to go into all the logistics of that here other than to say that that is a thing you can do. It is. So I always would recommend doing that in a relational way, and that's exactly what I did. I reached out to my editor, and I'd worked with her before, by the way. But I reached out to my editor and I said, my heart is not in this. I really would like to not do it. And it was scary. It was scary. My voice caught in my throat the way it just did. And I was so nervous. I was so nervous about what she would say. And you know what she said? She said, I bet that's the right choice then. If your heart is not in this, get out of it. They didn't want a book either that was going to be something I had forced out of myself. They wanted a book that would signal kind of care and communication and love and attention and focus and me. So the reason that I bring that up is because there was something that was so freeing for me about just saying, I don't want to do this project anymore. I don't care about it. I can't care about it. I cannot write another word, and I won't write another word. It was one of the most powerful boundaries that I have ever set, and it was a boundary with myself. It was a boundary between productivity and creativity, and it was a moment that I said, I will not any longer alienate myself from my work. I refuse. So I want to give you permission to do that too, understanding that it may not be that it's a book contract you need to cancel. It may be something totally different, but I just want to give you permission to really evaluate what you're doing, where you're spending your energy. Is that coming out of you in the form of productivity shaming? Or is your energy flowing out of you in that kind of caring, creative love that we all want from our free time, from the projects that we care about? So I promised I would give you some practical tips, and I want to give you 4 things to think about as you're kind of moving forward in your writing practice from this point forward. And the first one, we have got to stop shaming ourselves. Now, I say this as a recovering perfectionist, but one of the things that I see so often is that we, especially as high-achieving women, especially as marginalized people, we are so much more likely to approach the world from this black and white perspective. And by black and white, by the way, I don't mean it's good or it's bad, although yes, that will creep in too. But in the spirit of this video, what I actually mean by the black and white thinking is that sometimes it is so easy to say the things that we do only have value if other people find them valuable. That is so directly in opposition to the actual truth, which is that the most valuable pieces of you are actually your ability to express, your ability to create, your growth, your love, your care. Those are the things that you should be holding on to with dear life. This productivity thing, this thing where the market approves of you or it doesn't approve of you, you can be happy or you can be sad in that circumstance, but you're only really going to be happy if you are tapping into this part of you that really wants to create and express. You can only do that if you let go of the black and white thinking that either everybody loves it or it was a waste of time. Neither of those are true. We've got to find a place to approach our own craft with love and care, the same way that we want to send love and care out through our writing. So that's the first thing. The second thing, this is a new thing for me, so call me out on this if you catch me doing this moving forward. But I have recently put a flag in the sand and said, I am no longer telling myself or anyone else to knock it out, to get their butt in the seat. I am not doing it. Ethically, I think it is such a problem. And here's why. When we're thinking about knocking something out, we're thinking about butt in seat and just get it done. We don't say that. We don't use that type of language for something that we love to do. We don't even usually use that language for things that are that important to us, right? That is usually what you have to do when you're doing some terrible job for work. So let's not put that onto our writing. I don't know why I did it for so long, and I want you to stop too. There is no efficiency to be found in forcing yourself to sit at the computer. And in fact, doing that, I bet for myself, I bet that made so many of my projects take way, way longer than they had to because I was being so rigid. And here's what I want to say about this knock it out, butt in seat mindset. When we lean into that, we are leaning into the literal form of alienation that I described earlier in this video. We are leaning into the pull out yourself and just use your body robotically. Just get those cogs moving on the machine. I don't want that for you. I don't want that for me. I don't want that for anyone. And the way we get there is we stop telling ourselves to knock it out. We stop telling ourselves that we should be machines. We stop telling ourselves that we should be writing as fast as AI is. All of that is nonsense, and it so misses the point. So hold me accountable and hold yourself accountable. Let's stop telling ourselves to knock it out. It's a terrible way to look at it. Okay, the third thing that I want to encourage you to do as you're working toward creativity away from productivity is I want you to be a little bit less rigid with yourself. Now, I am not telling you to abandon all structure in your writing time. Absolutely not. And in fact, having some structure, both in terms of which days you're going to write, how long you hope to write, how much you hope to accomplish, what kinds of scenes you want to do, all of these kinds of things that we use basically to give ourselves instructions on what we need to be doing. These things are really, really useful. In fact, they're pretty foundational to the memoir method, our group program for women writing their memoirs, because we know that not having a structure usually means you won't finish your book. So I am not saying that you don't need a structure. You probably do. Particularly, by the way, if you have been through any kind of intense trauma or if you are neurodiverse. Either of these populations, we need structure. Keep your structure. What I don't want you to do, though, is punish yourself when that structure stops working. Here is a secret. This is a professional writer secret. No matter how good your structure is, it's not going to work forever. No matter how much right now you love writing at that coffee shop, or right now you love sitting on your back deck, or right now you love in your office, no matter what, that is going to fade away at some point and it will stop being as effective as it was. Now, the mistake that I made, I mentioned earlier, was that I was so rigid with myself that rather than realize that the structures I had set up in the past weren't serving me anymore, instead what I did was shamed myself, hoping that that would mean those structures would work again. Spoiler alert, it had no prayer of working, and it just made me pretty miserable. So let's not do that. Instead, what I want you to think about is how you can give yourself flexible structure. Now, my right hand in the memoir method, Emily Thrash, she has a great tip for outlining that we can also project onto any type of structural planning, including your writing time and your writing goals. And her advice is, when we do this kind of structural planning, we need to think about it like a vacation. Now, if you think about taking a vacation, probably there are some things that you want to plan. Of course, you want to plan where you're going to stay, how you're going to get around, but usually we also want to plan some activities, right? Like, you're going to be in a particular place. What are the things that you want to do there that you couldn't do at home? And some of those things are going to require a reservation, right? You might need to get a reservation to the museum that you want to go to. You might need to get tickets if you want to go see a play. But there also are going to be things that you'll discover when you're there. And if you have structured out your vacation schedule with such rigidity that you don't have time to explore, I guarantee you're going to miss out on some of that stuff that would have been really, really fun. So Emily's advice as we're thinking of structural planning is think about it like a vacation. The must-haves, the things that you absolutely would be so sad if you didn't do, schedule those in 100%. But if you get there and there's something you'd rather do that. So if you sit down to do your writing and realize right away that it sounds terrible to do your writing, just want to give you permission to not do it. Do something fun. So often, in my experience and the experience of women I have worked with, that feeling of, oh my gosh, I would rather pull out my own teeth than do this writing, that feeling is a powerful, powerful signal from your intuition that something is really badly off, that you have some kind of a misalignment, you have some kind of alienation from that work. When we are positioned to write in the most genuine, authentic, creative way, we don't have that type of resistance. And that's not to say that anybody's writing experience is perfect. It is just to say we have to stoke that creativity. And oftentimes when you feel that alienation from your project, it means that you have been neglecting that creative impulse. So we've got to get out there. We've got to make it fun again, right? Can you move? Can you take a walk? Can you go sit outside? Can you chat with a friend? Do you want to do voice to text for a couple of pages? What do you want to do? What would be fun? That's what I want you to ask yourself. Don't sit down, make yourself do something that sounds terrible. It's going to feel terrible, and you are just reinforcing that cycle of alienation. So we're going to knock that off. And then the last thing, and this is, I think, the kind of lifelong practice piece of it. The last thing I want you to do is I want you to think about what you're getting out of the process. Because so often, and I will say, as somebody that is on writing YouTube, I am just as guilty of this as anybody else. We see those shiny objects, the finished books, the published books, the book contracts, and it feels like it's going to solve everything for us, right? If we could just get the book contract, if we could just get on the bestseller list, if we could just get XYZ book sales, then we would be happy. No, you won't. Unfortunately, the only way that we can really find that true satisfaction from writing, that lasting feeling of having done something so valuable, is when we refine our process. It's when we find a connection to the creating part itself, to the creativity, not to the product or the productivity. The only time that we feel really, really, really good about the things we produce is when we've put ourselves in them, when we have done them from a place of passion or inspiration, or at the very least, fun. At the very least, an investment in learning, an investment in growing. And this is what I want for you. It's the thing I want to leave you with. As you are setting out to write, and oftentimes I find this time of year is a big time that we've all kind of fallen a little off the wagon and we're trying to get back on. I really want to make sure that you are kind to yourself, you are gentle, you understand that sometimes we have breaks in our productivity because we're humans, because we're out there making relationships, we're out there enjoying the sunshine, we're out there doing all of these other very, very important things. And what I want you to remember is that that's all part of the process. That caring for yourself, that making sure that you're mentally healthy, making sure that you feel really good, those are all parts of being a good writer. If we don't take care of ourselves, we so easily lose that creativity. And I don't want that for you. So what I want to leave you with, learn to love the process. I think most people that are watching this far, you are probably deeply invested in learning. And that's great because memoir writing is a craft. Writing a book is a craft. There is this piece that Marx was talking about, this connection that we have when we think of our work as this really valuable process, this process of creating and building and growing and learning about ourselves. So if you are someone who is getting back on the chapter train, you're starting your new memoir, I really want you to keep in mind that we are not serving ourselves when we lean toward the productive at the expense of the creative. Okay, I would love to help support you as you work toward this really authentic, genuine, creative goal. If you are a woman that is working on her memoir, I will invite you to go check out pageandpodium.com/memoir-method to learn more about our group program. We support women in there, not only with the creative piece, not only with getting in touch with who you authentically are as a writer, but also into some of the ways we can leverage that creativity and leverage that good feeling into natural productivity, into finishing a book that feels really good to finish. So if that sounds like something that might be good for you, that might be helpful as you work through this process, please reach out. I would love to support you. And otherwise, let me know if I can help. Happy writing. You know that feeling when a book just hits you? Not because the story is wild, but because it's shaped so intentionally that it almost makes you rethink your own story. You finish that last page and think, how did they do that? The structure, the honesty, the clarity. There's something under the surface that you just can't put your finger on. And the reason is, unless someone shows you how memoirs actually work, it's hard to translate that inspiration into your own writing. And that's exactly why we created the Memoir Method Monthly Book Club. If you want to join Emily Thrash every single month to dig into an exemplary memoir and figure out what's happening under the surface, head over to pageandpodium.com/book club. Your first month is free, and we can't wait to welcome you to the group.